local people, important issues. CBS 10 WILM's weekly focus on the Lower Cape Fear region. This is Byline Wilmington with your host, Don Ansell.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us. Well, with the shutdown of a number of major city newspapers, what's the fate of print news? That's what we're looking at today with our guest, the legendary reporter for the Wilmington Star-News, who went from reporting news to making news with her entry into politics. Betty Fennell, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for asking me.
Good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
We miss you.
Thank you.
We were chatting off camera, and you don't miss it, do you?
No, I don't miss the deadlines, and I miss seeing the people, that I work with, and also miss the sources that I had, but I don't miss the deadlines.
We were chatting off camera before, and you said, you would finish with a Wilmington City Council meeting at like 9:30 or 10 o'clock, then you have to go bang out a story.
Regurgitate everything you'd heard in about 3 or 4 hours in a very short number of paragraphs.
And, all right, so you retired from the Star-News, what
2004.
Year? So 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Was anything like this on the radar screen when you retired? Did you see this coming?
Well, really didn't see this coming, although we had been told for years that, the news industry was declining. And I think it's hard to believe, when you really can't see it like you've seen it this past year. I think it really hit home for a lot of people this past year. Because
at that time, and correct me if I'm wrong, I would venture to say the Star-News pretty much set the agenda in news for the region.
It did. TV followed the Star-News, and I'm sorry to say that quite often now the Star-News is following TV.
So it's changing?
Yes, it is.
Do you think its influence is as strong as it's always been or once was?
The newspaper? Oh, I think it's...
Or print in general?
I think it can be, but there's so many ways to get news now. You don't have to pick up that, that newspaper anymore to get news. There's so many other ways to get news, particularly the internet, primarily the internet. And you don't have to read just your local newspaper. You can sign up and read any paper across this country. And I read several newspapers or read their stories almost every day. To find out what's going on elsewhere, what's going on at the state level, what's going on at the national level. You can, find out, read stories and find out what's going on at the international level.
And just a few years ago, really wasn't like that.
You read
the Star-News was the paper of record, and that's what you read.
That's true. The last time I was in the Star-News, I was surprised to find that there's not a library in there anymore. When I worked there, when we wanted to go back and write a story and, put it in perspective, you had to look up the archives, go to the morgue and look up the old articles on the hard copy, the newspaper itself, the articles that had been cut out. And they don't have that anymore.
Well, what's been your reaction, a reporter for years, to what some are calling the imminent demise of the daily printed newspaper?
I'm surprised. I have been very surprised to see particularly the major newspapers in the country either fold up or go to printing 2 or 3 days a week. The newspapers do not make their money from subscriptions. They make their money from ads, and a lot of it's classified ads. Some of it's classified ads.
That's good revenue for papers, classifieds?
Yes, and retail. Retail ads, probably the best resource, monetary resource. But anyway, there's so many ways now that you can advertise if you've got, a used car that you want to get rid of. And you can advertise free or for almost nothing. And
you can. Craigslist is a free.
Craigslist, Wilmington yard sales.
Yeah, there's all kinds of outlets.
And radio. Even radio has.
Sure. Swap Shop and those type of. Do you think the writing's on the wall for the printed daily newspaper at some point?
I don't know. I really can't predict that. There's still part of the population that depends on that daily newspaper.
I do. I like it. I don't want to sit in front of a screen. I want to sit in the kitchen with my coffee.
Although I think that generation is dying off, and the next generation coming along does not mind sitting in front of that screen and reading the newspaper. Of course, there's a lot of the older generation, too, that have learned to you know, use the computer and read the news online. And I think that's going to be extremely important in the future. Whether it's going to mean the end of newspapers, I don't know. I'm not a very good predictor, or I don't read the crystal ball that well.
But the whole thing has a lot of folks concerned about the future of investigative reporting.
I've heard that.
Because there aren't really too many other news operations, especially on a local level, that have the resources to look into certain issues like the newspaper has or used to have. You were one of the great investigative reporters.
Thank you.
Well, and I'm not the only person that thinks that. When I mentioned to some of my friends and acquaintances you were coming on, they said, boy, things haven't been the same since Betty Fennell was covering news. Does that concern you?
Yes, it does, because I think now is the opportune time for people in public office, public service. If they want to do something wrong, they don't have to worry about being looked at too closely.
Oversight.
Absolutely.
Watchdog is on vacation, or maybe gone. And you reported local news. Your beat, most of the time, I think, was city.
City, county.
And county.
And politics. I covered a lot of politics.
Yeah. You liked that, didn't you?
Oh, I loved it.
Yeah. I couldn't wait to read what you...
There were some days I couldn't believe the paper paid me to do what I was doing. I enjoyed it so much.
Well, how has local reporting changed since you retired, or has it?
I think it's been soft. I don't think there's been the kind of digging. I don't think the newspaper, I know, hires a lot of young people right out of college. That they don't have the experience. They're all often naive, idealistic, and they don't ask the questions that need to be asked. Because I can tell you, when a public official does something, he does it for a reason, and it's not always out of the goodness of his heart.
And you uncovered a lot of that in your reporting days. What about how the print media has had to trim its coverage of local news? There just aren't as many reporters.
That's true.
For example, the paper always covered the New Hanover Regional Medical Center Board of Trustees.
That's true.
And that made quite a bit of news quite often, the meetings. They don't cover that on a regular basis anymore.
I think the public is losing out because they don't know what's going on. I just think that the public is the one that's losing in this situation, not knowing what's going on.
We're going to come back with our guest, Betty Fennell, and talk about covering the news versus making the news when we come back. Stay with us.